another episode of Advertising Alpha. Today we have Kevin Kline from Revenue Roll, who's an e-commerce partnership executive with 10 plus years of experience in sales, strategic alliances, and business development. He's currently the head of partnerships at Revenue Roll, but he was previously director of channel partnerships at Recharge and then also ShipStation as well. So really interested in talking about Revenue Roll today. It's something that we use, now somewhat extensively across our clients, and really excited to have you here, Kevin.
Thank you, Hal. Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and I'm happy to be on the show. I've heard good things.
Awesome. Well, we can hop right into it, and I'll go ahead and ask you the first question here. For all those direct-to-consumer founders out there who have not heard about Revenue Roll, can you just tell us a little bit about how it helps brands drive more revenue without relying on these kind of traditional paid channels?
Yeah, so for those of you who aren't familiar, Revenue Roll is a real-time B2C enrichment platform for D2C commerce brands. So we have built a pretty extensive identity graph that effectively has 293 million US-based consumers in it. And in that identity graph, we have a lot of interesting marketing information that brands can use to be more audience-centered in their campaigns and communication. We also get information or like the email, their name, their gender, their address, and all of this data in the marketing space can be used to better communicate with their customers and retarget people who are visiting their site in real time.
Awesome. And so uh, this actually leads to my second question, but I'm going to ask the second question now, and I want to just kind of dig deeper on this. But this sounds almost too good to be true. I mean, the biggest reason we use this and we like this is because we're driving all this paid traffic. And without something to kind of capture some of this paid traffic, it just disappears, right? But with Revenue Roll, they can capture that and then pipe some of these emails into your ad campaigns, but it also really helps your retargeting audiences on paid social, specifically Meta, but then also Google as well. This sounds almost too good to be true, how you're tracking this and how you're able to capture these emails. So from like a legal compliance standpoint, can you talk about how this works?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not a magic trick, and it's not too good to be true. I think that the solutions like Revenue Roll have popped up as sort of a direct response to the end of browser cookies with the iOS 14. I think the colloquialism that you hear in the ecosystem is sort of like the cookie apocalypse, right? I think brands lost one of their best tools in order to retarget and sort of follow people along online so that they can get a second or third chance at getting them to convert. When that went away, the only way to effectively figure out who is coming to your site is to use what's called server-side tracking, which is effectively a network where someone somewhere online has given their consent to have their information be resold. And we do this every day when we fill out loan applications, when we take surveys, when we do those sorts of things. And these data sources that we have used to build our identity graph have given us legal assertions that this data is allowed to be effectively resold. But in our estimation, that's not enough in order for a brand in the moment to be able to access that data. What it takes in order to be able to access that data is also consent from the person who hits on the site themselves. And if you've ever been online, you've probably seen something similar to this. It's usually manifests on the lower third of a site, some sort of compliance management statement or cookie statement that says, hey, we use data sources, effectively Revenue Roll being one of them, that allows us to identify and personalize your experience. And that is the two-sided consent model that we use to be both California privacy law compliant as well as compliant with privacy laws within the United States.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think, I mean, it's great. You obviously start with CCPA because that's the standard that everyone else has to follow. So it obviously is just that, makes it easier for any other advertisement across the US.
Yeah, I mean, we think about it so we're a very compliance first organization. It's very much the heart of our data model is to be compliant. And you're right. I mean, I think the easiest way to be compliant is to just adhere yourself to the strictest law in the nation, which is California. Our mission is to help people do better retargeting without sort of tricking anybody, right? I mean, the idea here is that the people have a full understanding of what is happening when they click that accept button or accept cookies, and that gives brands the ability to retarget and get a second or a third attempt potentially at getting that conversion. When before they sort of had to scrape and hope that they could get someone to fill out an email pop-up or give some of that zero-party data, which I think most customers and consumers are aware that they're just almost adverse to doing that in the first place. This just gives them another tool to be able to do better retargeting online.
Yeah, so if we can double click into the retargeting side, I mean, I saw this in a big way post iOS 14, where retargeting used to be a pretty big part of any kind of standard campaign setup, specifically on Meta. And those, retargeting audiences were relatively close to what we would see in terms of site traffic. Let's say you're retargeting site traffic over the last 90 days, it would be about 80% of what you saw on, let's say, your Shopify store. Post iOS 14, it dropped down to like 20% or less. It just
Yeah.
that kind of data loss was significant and huge, and all of a sudden retargeting just became something that it really didn't matter anymore. It was so small, and those campaigns really couldn't get enough spin behind them, where it became somewhat pointless. Can you talk a little bit more about how revenue roll improves retargeting audiences? And I know you mentioned this already, but just if you could talk a little bit about the background there and in your strategy, as well as what the difference you've seen in terms of expanding those retargeting audiences.
Yeah, so I guess a good place to start is like this concept of like retargeting. I think that means different things to different people, but in a broader context, it's just like you're coming at them with a message after they visited your site in some capacity, right? And so a lot of our brands do this with email because we get the email when we identify someone. But to your point, yes, like this data can also be ported into all of your advertising channels, Meta, TikTok, Google. And the idea is that it builds audiences within those platforms that are akin to what you're describing before sort of the audience, those more informed audiences went away post iOS 14. Like the way Meta looks at it now is, did someone interact with this content? It's almost like the TikTok model. Like, did they engage with the content, and like that's how you can retarget them? Whereas to your point, like you used to be able to retarget them based on demographic information. When they hit your site as a brand, we are able to identify them and give you additional demographic information that then can be ported back into those advertising channels to rebuild some of those more impactful audiences that went away during the iOS change. So that is very much the heart of what we do, and effectively makes your retargeting channels, be it your emailing channels, be it your direct mail channels, and certainly your advertising channels, be just more effective, right? So people using our solution tend to see ROAS go up, and even in the face of higher CPMs.
Awesome. And then, yeah, let's talk about the email side specifically too, because that's a clear, distinct advantage that we see and why we like to integrate revenue roll. Kind of going back to what I was saying earlier, we're driving a lot of paid traffic to the site, but guess what? Those people show up and they leave, right? You're just
Yep.
renting traffic. But with revenue roll, you can go capture that traffic, capture those emails, and then you really start to own that audience. And it really helps a lot of brands expand their email list, and then also just always, consistently go remarket to those people through email, consistently talk to them, and they're no longer renting, but they're beginning to start, they start to own their target audience, which is like hugely impactful. And I think it's something that a lot of DTC brand owners kind of miss, which is paid ads is renting, but email and having a big email list and an engaged email list is really owning your target audience.
100%. I think that brands are recognizing, certainly in the face of rising CPMs and some of the inflationary pressures and now tariff pressures, they're just putting pressure on the economic model of e-commerce in general, is that like retention is key, right? That word has just been consistently coming up over the past few years. Is like we see retention as twofold. One, owning the audience that is coming to your site and understanding them better, and owning that traffic by capturing information about them, porting it into your Klaviyo account, and coming up and being strategic on how you contact individuals depending on what product you're selling. The stat is fascinating, is that like if you have a high AOV, for example, over $500, your average time to close or time to conversion is generally over 6 weeks. And so that journey becomes really, really important for someone who's shopping for a product like that. And you can be strategic on like what touch points and where you start that journey. When are you going to send them notes? What flows are you going to send them inside your Klaviyo account to maximize conversion across your site? That's like net new, right? Those are people who are coming to your site for the first time, but you can't neglect the people who are in your contact list today who are going to come back and purchase from you multiple times. And so this solution, Revenue Roll, really helps not only identify the people who are coming back to the site who you want to know or you are already known to you and inside your Klaviyo account or your ESP account, but also like what are they doing on the site that might be indicative of a second or third purchase so that you can get a higher lifetime value out of customers long term.
Awesome. And then can you actually just speak a little bit, at least around the cost of capturing these emails? So I would say, for example, additional meta advertising, when you're doing a lead gen campaign, you can expect a cost per lead of like, let's say $3 to $5. It always kind of depends on whatever, offer or promotion you have around lead gen campaigns. To capture the emails through revenue roll, it's much cheaper, right?
Yeah, we net out somewhere between 1 to 2 cents an identified user, and our pricing is public. Yeah, I encourage your audience to go check out revenueroll.com and check us out. But effectively, we've created plans that include a certain number of identified users on a monthly basis, as well as some tools that really help improve and maintain high deliverability. The saying or the internal logic at our company is that the data is only as good as the brand's ability to use it and take measurable action on it. And so, if brands, for example, are struggling with deliverability, or they're struggling getting back into the inbox, Revenue Roll is a great solution to help them not only identify new users, but also maintain and grow their deliverability scores so that this data can be used most effectively.
Awesome. So actually on that piece, can we talk about the enrichment side of things? Definitely curious about what you guys do to ensure that, let's say the emails that you're piping back to a client's ESP, is the actual email, it's cleaned up, it's validated, things like that.
No, it's a great question. I mean, we go to great lengths to ensure data accuracy within our identity graphs. One of the things that's valuable about the graph is that we use a ton of different sources that is effectively informing the attribute information about in the graph, and we constantly use AI to cross-reference those different attributes across the different data sources. And if we notice discrepancies, for example, a mismatch across different data sources, then we don't pass that information because our confidence level is not high on that piece of information. We actually don't pass the profile at all if we don't feel confident that that is this person, that it's an active email user, that this person is who we say they are. And because the value again of the information is it accurate, and can the brand use that information to make more audience centered campaigns? But if the data is inaccurate, then the whole value proposition sort of goes out the window. And so we take a lot of effort, and we take that initiative pretty seriously within our organization.
Awesome. So that kind of leads into my next question here, which is deliverability and compliance are, a big deal in the retention world. How does Revenue Roll, kind of safeguard or protect brands from, spam traps, subscribes, and other kind of potential issues with ESPs when you're basically bringing in some cold emails,
Boy, it's
somewhat coldish emails?
Yeah. Well, that's actually a good place to start. So we don't port in cold leads. I think that's one of the primary ways that we protect a brand's deliverability is that we look for leads of customers that are likely to purchase, and we do that by scoring our leads that are passed into their ESP account. We score them on a number of things, namely like some of those scores are internal data within the graph, like have they shown intent to purchase within the last 30 days or something to that effect? Do they look like a customer that is likely to buy, or like does it look like the ICP for the brand? We also look at behavioral characteristics of that profile. So, for example, a behavioral characteristic that we've seen is, does this person have a high propensity to mark an email as spam? We've noticed that that's actually more of a behavioral trait than anything else. I've always joked that there's probably a behavioral science paper out there that someone could write about the propensity to unsubscribe from an email or propensity to mark as spam. If we see that in the graph, we immediately remove that person, right? And so we protect our brands from the habitual spam markers or habitual unsubscribers. So we don't pass them at all, so that there's no risk to contact them. The other things we look at is like activity on the site. So did this person do something on the site that was really, really high or high intent or indicative of intent to purchase? An example of that, a classic example of that is, did they add something to the cart and then did they abandon, right? How many pages did they look at? How much time did they spend on the site? These are all signals that we know, or that brands know, are pretty indicative of an intent to purchase. And so we look at those higher quality, lower down the funnel leads as the ones of the highest quality that we send over to brands to then be contacted. We also protect domain reputation with our deliverability suite. That filtering I talked about is a key component of it, but we also have a warming tool that we use that effectively helps brands maintain high domain authority inside Google Postmaster. So we look at both of those, and we also take a strong look at their sending habits and how they're utilizing this data to make sure that their deliverability not only stays high in Klaviyo, but that their Postmaster score is also high as well.
Awesome. So actually, can we talk about warming up lists really quick? Because I'll say that's another thing too, where I mean, it really depends on the level of sophistication of the brand and if they have like a dedicated email marketing or retention agency or like someone in-house. But I've seen more often than I would have hoped, brands who just don't understand the concept of warming up lists or segmentation strategies, things like that. Can you just talk about that on like a high level and then specifically like, how your revenue role kind of plugs in there and kind of what considerations you have around like warming up lists and things like that?
You're 100% right. And like I should clarify that the concept of warming is not a new one in the space, right? I think that ESPs, especially when you're migrating from one ESP to another, or you're getting a new domain, you have to do a fair amount of warming, which is effectively just a seeding process between subdomains in the main domain. And so what we've realized though is that in that seeding process, we are able to take some actions it happens within that process to tell the providers faster that this domain and this sending domain and this IP is in fact has high authority. And so we're able in a lot of cases to warn our customers quickly if they are moving to a new ASP or if their domain is in not great shape or they don't have the health to be able the health score that they need to be able to send more emails. We can help them repair that pretty quickly. The other key component, warming is not just about domain health, although that's an important component. It's also about like volume. So volume of sends. You can't just go from a cold domain to sending, tens of 30 millions of emails overnight. ESPs like Klaviyo and the rest of them that are in the ecosystem, they understand this. And so they want to be able to get people warm to a certain level so that they can send more emails. And so do we, because now you're getting more profiles, you're getting more leads within your Klaviyo account or your ESP account. You want to be able to contact those individuals. And so your volume is naturally going to increase a little bit. So we want to be able to warn so that one, they can send more emails, two, but also maintain that high domain authority throughout the entire process.
Awesome. It's great breakdown there. I appreciate that. I mean, that's it. That's all the questions I have for you. Is there anything else you want to say about revenue roll or anything else about this space in general?
Yeah, I think that the reason that I came to revenue roll is that I talk with a lot of founders and brands pretty consistently that tell me a couple of things that are really like challenging in business right now. And that is, rising CAC, rising CPMs. They're struggling with landing in the inbox. Maybe their email marketing programs are not delivering the way they were at one point or another. So it just feels like a lot of challenges in the e-commerce side are converging to make it difficult to get brands to profitability, to get brands to some of where they were maybe 4 or 5 years ago. So if you're a founder and you are struggling with any of those things, please reach out to me. I would be happy to show you how our solution is sort of the answer to a lot of the challenges that I think brands and CMOs are facing on a regular basis in our space.
Well, I appreciate you being on, Kevin. I thought this was an awesome conversation. Definitely learned a lot in just the short time we had to chat.
Thanks, Hal. I always appreciate your time and good luck with the show. Thank you so much.